added it.
Appreciate you.
All right.
I'm paying.
What's up, family? What's going on? Welcome to another episode of Raising the 5%. I'm Majorian Lowe, one of the co-founders and the co-host of the pod.
I'm Maya Young, the other co-founder and co-host of the pod.
Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this episode of the podcast, and email or comment anything y'all want to discuss on the show. You can email us at raisingthe5%@gmail.com. And in this episode today, we're just talking with Mr. Markus D. Reneau. Markus is a New Orleans native who is currently an attorney at the Center for Heirs Property in Charleston, South Carolina, where he protects property rights for historically marginalized families. He earned his law degree from Howard University School of Law, gaining experience through positions including a judicial internship with the Honorable Eric P. Christian at the D.C. Superior Court. He also served as a student attorney in the Investor Justice and Education Clinic, and he had internships with the Legal Defense Fund and the United States Security and Exchange Commission. His commitment to criminal justice reform includes work with the Promise of Justice Initiatives, Jim Crow Juries Project, and serving as an investigator fellow with the Orleans Public Defender's Office, where he conducted investigations for clients facing criminal charges. Before law school, Markus worked in education and policy. He served as a Yale fellow at Oakham School in England, preparing students for United States University applications, and spent 3 summers as a teaching fellow with Breakthrough New Orleans. As a Yale graduate, he mentored first-generation low-income students and worked as a K-12 education policy scholar at the Century Foundation. In addition to all of these things, Markus is pursuing an LLM in taxation from Georgetown University with a certificate in estate planning. Throughout his career, Markus has demonstrated a consistent dedication to civil rights, economic justice, educational equity, all while working to protect and advance the interests of underserved communities. Thanks so much, and let's welcome Mr. Markus Reneau.
Welcome.
You've done a lot, brother.
Yeah, very stacked.
I didn't even know you did I knew you lived in England, but I didn't realize that you were there as an educational teaching fellow. That's pretty dope.
Yeah, it's one of them things when you go like up to the Ivy League, have special things for Ivy students, because apparently back in the 90s, a teacher at the school connected with a Yale professor. Yeah, so they had like a teacher who connected with a Yale professor. And every year since the 90s, they would send a graduating senior to be a teaching fellow and admissions counselor, like college counselor. So it was very funny when I got sent over there, because if you imagine the part of England is like New Hampshire or Vermont, where it's like 97-98% white people.
That PTSD, please.
And so it's real funny though, because it turns out my rugby coach was from there, and he went to the school when I was in college. Mm-hmm. And so I asked him casually one day in practice, I was like, hey, you ever heard of Oakham, England? And he was like, yeah, mate, I'm from there. And I was like, yeah, I'm going there to do this job. And then so he connected me immediately with like the local rugby club. And so it's kind of like I was thousands of miles away from home, but I still had like a sense of community. And it was just really interesting because I could tell, like, for a lot of the people in the town, they never really interacted with black folks before, just by like sheer,
especially not a black American.
Yeah, and then like the world over, they think we're like the coolest people as black Americans, and so I remember students would be like, "Oh, sir, like you're like so cool," and da da da, and I wouldn't even be doing anything. Like I would just be
being Markus. Yeah.
And it was real. It was just because, like, like they hold that position of Yale fellow in such high esteem, and so then like with me having that position, it was always like you could just see the palpable like dissonance. They would be like, "Oh, like this dude's probably way smarter than me just because of the association with the school," and I was like, "I appreciate it."
You said rugby?
Yeah, I played rugby in college. I still play now. Yeah.
Interesting.
That's a good. That's a good segue into one of our gateway questions because you've had such diverse academic experiences, especially for a black person. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but you have had such.
This is what the pod is for. We're actually trying to increase.
We're trying to increase that likelihood, but I do think that it's rare to have that. I mean, Ivy League education, an HBCU education, and now you're at a T14 law school getting an LLM. What has that experience been like at each level, right? Like, what was it like being a black boy from New Orleans and going to Yale, and then the transition into, I guess, something that feels more like home with Howard, with the hustles, but also feel like there's a level of I could imagine there's elitism at all three stages, but I think that Howard is like the elite black law school, and there's a lot of classism there, I'm sure, too. So what has that experience been like, kind of navigating those things and being, in those different educational spaces?
I will say I can remember leaving New Orleans to go to Yale, and the first time in my life I realized, one, that I had a New Orleans accent, and two, just how thick it was and people couldn't understand what I was saying. And it's like I can remember freshman year just having to really decide then and there. It's like, all right, am I gonna mask the way that I talk, or am I just gonna modulate it? And so I decided, if I speak a little slower, people understand what I'm saying, because I would get excited with freshman year stuff that you get excited with. I had never seen snow before, so that was cool. Until it was not. And then after that,
it becomes not very quickly.
A day or so.
Now I'll never forget dude who ended up being my best friend in college. He was my roommate, and we still close friends to the day. He's from New York, and both of his parents went to Yale, and all three of his older siblings also went to Yale, and so he was like a black legacy. And being from New York, we had Spanish class one day, and it was snowing like crazy. And he was like, "Ah, it's time to go." And I was like, "Bro, you don't see the snow outside?" And he was like, "It's just like rain, sun." I have a picture of,
it's not though.
No,
it's not at all.
But you gotta remember though, in New York, they just keep going.
I grew up in St. Louis, but it's not like rain. No, that's a crazy comparison.
Very different.
I think he was just trying not to scare me. Let me see if I can find a picture. There's a picture that I always show people when they ask me what it was like up there, and it's like me walking behind him, and he got an umbrella just covered in. I don't know if you can see that.
In snow. Yeah. And y'all just walking around.
And he's just casually walking to class like nothing. And so that I think was very emblematic of my whole experience there. Was just being open to new experiences, new types of people. Yale was the first time I really interacted with wealthy black folks on a level that was very organic, if that makes sense. You wouldn't even know. I remember this dude who I used to hang out with all the time. We used to play FIFA, and I never even played FIFA growing up. So that's one thing. I was like, "Yo, what is this?" And he was like, "Oh, it's just like 2K," which is crazy because I didn't really play 2K growing up either. So I'm like, "How you gonna stereotype me?" But it was harmless.
Are you from New Orleans? Y'all play 2K down there, huh?
Yeah, it was kind of just learning how to cross cultures, I think. And turns out that dude was the son of the second wealthiest guy in India, and he's low key a prince, or not India. He's Indian, but his dad was Scottish. It's very weird, really crazy mixes. And then I knew a couple princes as well, who you wouldn't even think that they were royalty, because they were just so normal, if that makes sense. And so I think coming from that experience, going to Howard Law School was very interesting because, like you said, there's a lot of elitism, but I don't want to say it's like flaccid elitism, but it's more like, I'm stunting on you type. And I can remember, like, I had a very good experience at Howard. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And it's just interesting how the way that people reacted to finding out that I went to Yale was different than I think I expected. Because, it's like white folks, you'd be like, all right, they'd be shocked. They'd be like, oh, you only got in because
You went to Yale? Oh my God.
You the
Yeah,
microaggression,
Yeah. But it was the same thing with black people, but low-key anger. Because they were like, bro, like, how did you get it? Like, you don't even hold yourself as a Yale graduate should. My thing would be like, how would you know you didn't go there? Like, what you talking about? And so it's
Well.
I'll never forget. In my contracts class, our contracts professor was very on it. It was funny because if she had her hair tied up, you knew that she was gonna come after you that day. But if she had her hair down, because she had sister locks, she was cooling. And then the day that I got cold called, she had her hair pulled back. It was like real tight, like it was fresh retwist, so she was ready.
Yeah.
And then she cold called me, and I delivered the cold call. And I think up to that point, my delivery of the cold call was the first time that like she didn't have any notes. She was just like, okay, Mr. Reneau, thank you. And then she moved on. And then I remember after that class, people were like, damn, he's smart as hell. I didn't know he was that smart. He's so low key, da 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 da. And then that's when they were like, well, he went to Yale, right? Like that like explains it. And then it became like a thing where like I could see labels and like people trying to put you into a box more so than the white folks do it. Cause it's almost like, they expected like, oh, you went here, you did this, you did that. So it's like you should act a certain way. And when you don't have that, I guess a veneer that they expect, they're just kind of thrown off by it. Like I said, more so than the white people, because black folks, we louder with our criticisms and stuff than they are.
I guess that's a good. Oh, what you want to say something, Maya?
I was gonna say that's interesting because it seems like, you talked about having to speak slower and kind of like your relationship with respectability politics at Yale, and then it seems like even though you went to now a school that's like, I don't know, hyper focused on making sure you feel secure in your blackness and learning the law, all those things, you still kind of had to engage with respectability politics. So it's kind of like processing that even when you're at an Ivy or even when you're at HBCU, you're kind of still playing the same game. And my question is like, because you were at Yale and obviously Yale has a law school and I don't know where they're ranked, but they're pretty, aren't they like tied?
They're like 1 or 2.
Yeah, they're always back and forth.
Yeah.
What made you choose to go to Howard instead of like even maybe matriculating into Yale Law? Did you know you were going to go to an HBCU law school regardless after graduating, or was that something that you kind of decided while being at Yale?
I think the kind of like circle back a little bit, like the respectability, I think could be seen in the fact, I guess another thing that people couldn't believe low key that I went to college where I did was because I think every single day until 3L, like second semester, I wore like sweats and a hoodie to class because it's like, I'm comfortable. Like we learning. Like I ain't trying to impress you.
Was Howard one of those schools like at Prairie View? We dressed up in undergrad like pretty much regularly. Was Howard? But in law school, I wore sweatpants and t-shirts damn near every day. Was Howard like a dress up school? HBCU still? It was a fashion show.
It depends. I know like one section had a specific professor who, yeah, she like made them dress up on Wednesday. Because I remember like they would come to class in suits, and then also like some people had their own fashion sense where it's like I'm comfortable in the suit, so I'm gonna wear a suit. You know what I mean? There wasn't really like a requirement to do that. Now I know the undergrads.
I'm not wearing a suit to get a tongue lashing. I'm sorry. I'm not wearing a suit to get told I'm stupid 5 times in like one day. I'm not doing it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I know like my 3L second semester, I wore a suit every day because I was either going to court. Yeah, because every day I had class, I would leave from court. So of course, if I'm going to court, I'm going to wear a suit, and especially because Judge Christian, he went to Howard undergrad, and so he taught at the law school as an adjunct, and so it's like I'm gonna respect his courtroom, especially because it was like every day that the court was open, he held court, and so people were like, "Man, I've never seen you look so like polished. Like that's crazy. Like I didn't." Like one dude told me he didn't know I owned a suit, and I was like, "Bro, we both in law school. We both."
What do you mean by?
Was this person black?
Yeah, he was. And I was like, "Son,
that's crazy."
And the crazy part was he was in my legal writing class for 1L. So he saw me the day we had to do our oral arguments in the suit. And I'm like, all right, he's just playing game. But to your point about I forgot.
Respectability politics.
Yeah, respectability.
And she asked why you didn't go to Yale.
Oh, okay. So what happened was actually I remember when I applied to law school, I was fortunate enough to get selected as a Sidley Austin pre-law scholar. And so they paid for one of my LSAT like sittings and an LSAT prep course and like 7 applications to law school. And so because of that, I just like was like throwing them out. And so I applied to Yale, Harvard, Georgetown, I think Stanford, and then I got a bunch of like waivers. And so of the schools that I applied to, I think I applied to like 12 and maybe 6 accepted me. I got outright denied at 1, and then the other 5 waitlisted me. And so all the schools that waitlisted me, I was like, well, basically that's a denial in my mind. And so I was like, I'm not messing with y'all. And I know Yale was one of those schools that waitlisted me. And then what ended up happening was once I was awarded the Marshall Motley Scholarship, that's when people were like, oh, you should tell them, the ones that waitlisted you, that you got Marshall Motley, that, that's going to bump you into acceptance. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, if you wasn't rocking with me before, like, I'm not going to, gift you more clout.
Right.
And so I did that. And so that's why I didn't go to Yale for law school. And also, around the time I was applying, I know, like, I actually have a picture of Justice Marshall's, like, postage stamp. Where he was on the, and, like, I remember my mom worked at the post office all my life. And I remember she got me that when I was, like, a little kid. And so when I thought about the law, like, I thought of, like, Justice Thurgood Marshall, and I thought of, like, Howard Law School, and, like, that whole kind of conceptualization of, like, being black and, like, using the law to help your people. And so that's why I was like, I just had to apply to Howard. And so that was kind of, like, my number one. It just was not going to be affordable without the help of Marshall Motley, because D.C. is not a real place. Yeah. And so it's like once I had that like kind of cushion, and like Howard had already accepted me, I was like, well, let's just go here and see what this is about. Because actually, I also got accepted at undergrad, but it was interesting because they over-enrolled the College of Arts and Sciences. And so they were like
HBCUs, Lord have
Usually
mercy.
do.
They do that all. They did that preview like every year we were there. They over enrolled.
This is our largest class we've ever had, baby.
And now we ain't got nowhere to put these.
They
motherfuckers.
can't stay nowhere. They can't eat. They can't. Yeah, it probably
now
is.
we
real.
fighting at the student section to get a damn meal.
Now they literally said, oh, put down your seat deposit, and I was like, hold on,
seat deposit for undergrad?
Yeah, for undergrad. They were like, put down your seat deposit, and then we'll tell you your scholarship offer. And I was like, it don't work like that.
You gotta pay to.
I was like,
hold on.
Wait a minute, hold on.
I was like, so you want me to? I was like, so you want me to blindly just
pay you for some shit that I may not even want?
Right.
I gotta pay for my scholarship. I'm
Come
confused.
on.
And I'll never forget, dude was like, well, I mean, how bad do you want to go here? And I was
Not
like,
that bad.
exactly. I was like, nah.
Not that bad. HBCU admissions officers that they FBI, y'all
No.
need to investigate them across the board
Across
because
the board.
HBCU admissions
Thumbs up.
officers are some of the most like they're the worst.
No,
they,
like horrible people.
like I love my HBCU. I love my HBCU to death.
Right.
But
But
that
you would think they got state secrets. The way they
Man.
make sure it's not that
you would
serious.
think they getting paid like $500,000 for this job. Like,
It's not
who
that
you trying to keep
serious.
out of here? Like, what's going on?
It's just weird. It's weird.
That's
That's crazy. Not pay for the scholarship. I've never heard that before.
Never heard that before
Just
in
to
my
see the
life.
offer. Like,
Just to see
my
it.
God.
That's insane. First of all, seat
Crazy.
deposit in undergrad is blowing me. I didn't get accepted nowhere that required a seat deposit to me to get it for undergrad. When I heard about that in law school, I was blown away.
Yeah,
I gotta pay you to go to this school? Like, what are you talking about? Of course I gotta pay you to go to this school, but I gotta pay you before I even get it like in here for real? Like, nah,
sit
that's
down?
crazy.
non-refundable deposit.
Yeah, and it's non-refundable.
Non-refundable?
My seat deposit for tech was like $1,200. I'm like, whoa, hold on.
I did not pay a seat deposit for law school, but still,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. But one thing I think we should have asked you from the beginning, which you can answer this after you answer the second question I'm gonna ask. But why did you want to be a lawyer in general? I think we should start asking folks that, like, what brought you to want to pursue this profession in general, but also dealing with, it sounds like you kind of had a through line experience of folks maybe underestimating you or maybe placing expectations on you because of how you present. And I'm wondering, like, what did your upbringing, how do you keep yourself grounded dealing with that? And, like, how did your upbringing influence you and, like, who you are today and how you show up as a Black attorney and, like, navigating those types of expectations you get from folks that may be in law school or just, like, in life in general?
Yeah, I think so. It's like the true answer of why I wanted to become an attorney is because I like to wear suits. And so as a kid, I was like, what profession can I do that I can wear a suit and it'd be accepted? And so that was being an attorney. And then as I got older, that's when I realized that, like, oh, it's a real serious job and, like, you can defend people's rights, etc. And so, of course, when it was time to write my law school admissions essay, I definitely didn't add in I like to wear suits. I chose the second part about, like the Constitution and defending rights. Like, all that's true. All that's very true.
You said the Constitution in your essay? I know
did.
they love that. I know they love that.
It was a period of time, like in 2020.
Where it was still a viable document?
And it was like I had just done I don't want to say a companion course, but it was like basically comparison of like British law and American law. And so I had a real like affinity for our Bill of Rights. I was like, yo, like we live it. Like America's great. Like
We got it over here.
I'm trying to go back and I'm trying to do the thing, help my people. And so that's like it kind of just cemented. But I think to your other question, like I think I stay grounded by my family, really, because my dad, he's Belizean, and my mom, she's from New Orleans, and both cultures are very like rich and unique, I guess. And so like I guess being a combination of both of them, I've always had a strong sense of just acceptance of who I am. And so I know, like, when I first grew my hair out at, like, 16, I remember, because, like, growing up, everybody knew I wanted to be an attorney. And so, like, in the family, I was seen as, like, oh, he's basically going to be our attorney in the family type. And so that's why it's like I was never really ashamed of the fact that, like, even when my hair was like a real nappy bush, like all throughout high school, because that's when it really first started, like the doubts per se. Because just like the respectability of like people in New Orleans saying like, oh, like this nappy headed little dude, like his hair look crazy. But then I guess they start talking to me, or they figure out like my GPA aspirations and all that, and it's like, oh, he going places,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's like, oh, okay. I mean, why you doubting me just because of how I look? And so I kind of just carried that. I don't know if it's like a chip on my shoulder or what, like into every space after that. And so then once I grew my locks out, it just became even more of a sense of pride. And I think especially with the Caribbean impact, because it is a part of like the culture that I grew up with, where it's like it was never seen as a negative thing, or just like an expression of self. Like it's like this how the hair naturally grows like this. I just trained it to stay together, and so that's why it was really a big deal to me. But yeah, I think I stay grounded just because I never can really forget who I am or like where I come from. Like I think even in just how I like speak, like I can like modulate my voice and speak like very professionally when it's necessary. Like obviously if I'm addressing the court or if I'm handling business, I'm not going to speak as casually or comfortably as I would around my friends. But it's just never been a point of something to hide from. And I know even when I was at Yale, I think that's really when my groundedness kind of kicked in, because I remember a lot of people dealt with imposter syndrome, and I was a first generation student ambassador on campus, like first generation low income, I think it was called. And so there was a lot, and I was a junior and a senior by the time I was doing that. And so I was like peer helping other students from like similar backgrounds, and just like hearing their stories of like wondering, like, oh, like I look around and I say like, look at this posh environment, my family back home struggling. It's like I would just remind them, which would be reminding myself, it's like you worked to get here, like you wasn't just handed this. And it's like just kind of knowing my story. And then also I think really and truly is when I look at the generation behind me in the family. Like my nephews are, I'd say, like my inspiration, and my niece too now. She's 4 or 3. I think she's 4. I don't know, but she's getting to the stage where like now she can like look up to me and like kind of recognize me as a human being. And so it's just that younger generation kind of keeps me going, because I want to always give them a like something to look up to, something to be proud of, to know that like you can succeed in life without compromising who you are.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This is like
Can y'all
sort of
see me?
no.
Okay. I was texting in the chat. I guess y'all couldn't see the chat. But let me log out and come back in.
I texted you back.
Oh, I didn't see it. Let me hang up and come back.
Anyways, we're usually not like this.
No, it's cool.
Usually,
Technology.
yeah, it's usually because he's usually the one. Like I see all of these buttons that's like recording and everything, and so it's usually his studio. But we've been using my studio, so maybe it's me. I don't really know, but.
Did you say something?
Oh, I was saying that's crazy because we talked about something similar that you said about like not compromising yourself a few episodes ago, about how it's important to just like remember who you are, not let different environments change you. And I feel like that's relatable, because I remember when I went to Vermont, I think you mentioned that it was similar to where you were in Oakham. And I can imagine, I mean, Yale is Connecticut, so it ain't too far. New Haven's, but it ain't too different. And I think when you're in places where you don't feel the need to remind people of your humanity, but it seems to be something that people keep reminding you of, you start to get even more grounded in like, this is who I am. And honestly, no matter what you think I look like, how I sound, whatever, I'm in the same exact place you are. And so that only continues to like ground you more and recognize. So I think that was really cool that you said that. And especially the generation after you, because that's honestly the whole point. So,
Exactly. Like I
yeah.
love the fact that like the first graduation that my oldest nephew went to was my college graduation,
Hmm.
and like it's funny because they have like college day at school, and he would wear like a Yale T-shirt,
Oh,
and
it's so
one of the
cute.
teachers was like, now he lives in semi-rural part of Louisiana outside New
Hmm.
Orleans, and he was like, the teacher asked him, "Oh, what you know about Yale?" Like, and he was like, "Oh, my uncle is about to graduate from there." And then teacher was like, "Oh wow, he must be really smart." My nephew immediately is like, "Yeah, smarter than you." And I was like, "Bro, chill. You can't,
Not to the teacher.
you can't be doing that." Like,
Not to the
or
teacher.
like when he was younger, well, I mean, the younger one would like correct the teacher when, like, if me and him talked about something, and the
Hmm.
teacher said something that maybe was different than I said. He was like, "Well, my uncle said da da da." And you went to LSU, he went to Yale, so he knows what he's talking about. And so they had to
That's
learn that
funny.
like, nah, you can't you can't be doing that. But them kids, man.
It's funny. That's crazy. I was side note tangent. I was reading. There's a book. It's called Tony at Random, and it just came out. It's about Toni Morrison, her coming up, and
Mm.
there's a story in it about her family, her parents essentially leaving Alabama because one of their kids went to school and told the teacher that they were wrong about something, and out of fear of being lynched, they left Alabama in like the 1940s, and it's just like amazing. Where were we at now as a country in general? But we still got a lot of work to do. But shit, it's like that's not a distant memory. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that ain't that long ago. You know what I mean? But back to the interview question. Sorry for that salient and somber point. uh, oh my, you want to take one actually? Did you actually
Yeah,
ask one? Or okay, you go
I
ahead.
did, but we can segue. Because you were talking, obviously, we heard about you going to Yale for undergrad, Howard for law, and then now you're at Georgetown for your LLM. Can we
Yeah.
actually talk a bit about how that program has been going? And then for people who are watching, can you describe what an LLM is? Because I don't think we've ever even mentioned the
And
idea.
why would you need one? What would you need
Yeah,
an
and
LLM
what would you
for?
need? So
Okay.
that entire description of
Yeah.
that.
So an LLM is stand for Master of Laws. It's some Latin. I think it's like Legalis Letteris Masteries. I don't really speak Latin, but basically, it's like the JD is very general, right? And so the LLM allows you to focus in on like a specialty to specialize. So I chose to specialize in taxation. Um, like Majoring probably knows, like I have like a deep, um, it's a deep hatred
Hmm.
of the Internal Revenue Service,
Oh,
just
I'm
as a
sorry.
concept. And so I decided in law school, once I pivoted from like criminal justice education to economics, once I made that pivot, it was while I was at the SEC doing the externship. And while I was there, I realized they're like, oh, like so and so at XYZ hedge fund robs 30,000 people of their life savings. He gets a slap on the wrist. It's like, that's crazy. What is that? But then I learned about the investor justice clinics, which Howard has one, and that's where student attorneys represent people going through arbitration to get their justice from the wrongdoers and like the financiers who messed them over. So you can almost imagine like, what was that dude's name? I think Bernie Madoff, who like
Mm-hmm.
scammed
Fraud all
billions.
them people.
Yeah. And so it's like he made millions and billions in disgorgement payments, but then people also went to arbitration against Bears. Well, I don't remember the name of his company, but they went against his company to get like their money back, because what happens is the SEC cannot force them to pay you back your money, because when you sign up for
The terms
some
and
kind of
conditions.
account, you sign away your rights to join
Oh, my goodness.
a class
This
action.
is horrible.
So it's like that long paper when you start your brokerage.
All them terms and
your
conditions, you
IRA.
just scroll
You
to the
can
bottom
read.
of
Exactly. Yeah,
and
yeah,
don't
yeah,
read.
Freedom.
Yeah. And so that includes the arbitration clause. It's pretty mandatory. And so what happens is students in investor justice clinics, there's also like attorneys and law firms who do this type of work as well. And they like represent clients in front of the FINRA, which is the Financial Industries Regulatory Association or Authority. I can't remember what the A stands for. But they like regulate finance. And they came after the 2008 debacle with
A big housing bust.
yeah, it was part of like Sarbanes-Oxley Act, and so like that was one of like the guardrails that was put in place, and so that's kind of where it started from, my disdain for the IRS, then which led me to understand about like the importance of tax law in general, and just like understanding like tax, because it's a system that we can't avoid. I mean, you can minimize it, but you can't avoid it.
You can't
They
get
be
away
trying.
from it, though.
Yeah,
They be trying.
yeah. And so that's when I was like, I took my first tax class in law school. I took income taxation, individual income taxation, and I got an A in it. And I was like, wow,
I took
it was like
income
one of my
tax, too. I did not get an A, though. It was required at my law school, but I did take the class.
hey, you got the knowledge. And so it was, I think, one of the first classes that I got an A in that I actually felt like, wow, like I learned a
I like
lot.
this, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was like, okay. So I took another class that was corporate taxation, which was incredibly difficult. But then I also got an A in that, and then I was like, all right, maybe
I'm
this
onto
is
something here.
So by the time I got the partnership tax, I talked with the professor who was a Georgetown professor as well, and I asked her about the LLM, and she was like, "Yeah, you should do it." And then, but the thing was, I was already committed to coming to Charleston, and Georgetown is in D.C. And so I was like, "Well, how am I going to do that?" And she was like, "Georgetown has an online program, which is a companion to the in-person." And so literally, I'll be in class, and there'll be like students in the classroom in DC, and then behind the professor at the front is a Zoom screen,
Oh, that's
and
fun.
on the Zoom screen are like the little boxes of multiple online students. So everybody will be in class talking, they'll be lecturing, and then the professor will turn around and be like, "Marcus, what do you think?" And I'll be like, "Oh, wait." Like, I remember the first time it happened, I think I was driving somewhere, and then I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's lat." And it's so, but he came back to me. He circled back. He's like,
Right.
"Okay, no problem." He's like, "Once you get it figured out, we'll circle back." And then I think that is when I was like, "Oh, this is real."
Oh, this is a real program. This is school for real. Yeah, I did be at home.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They plug in.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Because I got like real lax because I was like, oh, like they record everything, so it's like they
You thought
record
this
the
was it.
lecture.
You thought this
so I
was
can-
3 again. Nah,
Yeah,
buddy.
exactly.
Nah, this
Watch
is
it back.
not around here, partner.
Nah, that was it. And so it's like you got to be in class locked in, but then you can also watch it back. So like I'll go to class, listen to lecture, take a little notes, not too much notes because everything is open book, which like some people be like, oh, that's great, but as a law student,
I feel like it makes it harder.
Great.
I feel
It
like
does.
the open
worse.
book makes
The
it worse.
expectation is a lot higher. Yeah.
Right, so what happens is, I remember first class or orientation, they were like, yeah, all of your exams are open notes because tax law is an open notes profession. So it's like you have the thick like
tax
rules.
code.
Yeah, tax code. But that doesn't help you if you don't
That's
actually
not
know how to
helpful,
use
yeah.
it. You know what I'm saying? So that's why.
And if you
know,
haven't
they
been
teach you.
using it,
Exactly. So they teach you how to like navigate it, what parts go here.
I remember
Like,
that.
I got a little bit of that.
Book. I got rid of mine. My code book. It was about
I
this
still-
big.
Yeah, nah, it is. It is. And I got a little bit of that in law school, but in the LLM, it's like hyper focused because in this, it's like everybody chooses to go to law school per se, but like everybody chooses for real to do an LLM. So it's like everybody you're in class with is either already practicing or they're like straight through and they're like, I just want to specialize. Or they're like, I've been practicing for 30 years and you know what, I want to switch over to do estate planning, so let me get this specialization. And so that makes for a very interesting mix of people that you're in class with. And I think the program has really been great because
You selling me on it.
it allows you to like just nerd out straight up and like what you're interested in. And so it's like if you can imagine your favorite class from law school and like your favorite strain of law and just focusing on that all the time. And that's all you do, like different contours of that. And so that's really cool. And then plus you got the international aspect where there's like students from like England who work at like a firm that does cross-border transactions. So they're like, I need to understand the U.S. tax system because I have clients who have trust in the United States, but they're British citizens. And so like that's a whole nother level of it. And I really like it because when I think about like civil rights, I think about economic justice. And I think about how like the knowledge of how to utilize the system is there, but it's like a gap because you have like say like an army of like civil rights attorneys, people ready to do the work, help the communities. But then you also got cohorts of like financial attorneys who also like, they might want to help people because it's like it's not a secret that when it comes to like tax law in practice, like the mass majority is focused at like the very top, like the ultra high net worth individuals. And that's because that's where the most money's at is, charging them tens of thousands of dollars an hour to help them save millions when it comes to being taxed by the government. Because I mean, like, if you die, when you die, and if you die without $13.9 million to your name, the feds don't care. But if you have more than that, then they're coming for everything, or as much as they can get. And so the methods that they use to minimize taxation can like scale down to anyone. And like a big oversight is those people who are not at the federal taxation level, but they're also not like asset poor. Or it's like, they might have a house that's worth $500,000. And so now it's like, I'll give you a prime example. In South Carolina, most probate fees to probate in the state, that's about $99 if you're under $100,000 of worth of like your estate value. But once you get over $100,000, you pay $99 plus a percentage of your income between $100,000 and $500,000. And then once you go over $500,000, you pay $99 plus a percentage between $100 and $500 plus a percentage of anything over $500 up to $1 million. And then once you get to $1 million, it goes. It just keeps going up.
It just keeps going up.
You end up having.
And these are cumulative. They're not
Exactly.
Like, wow.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what ends up happening is you have someone who it will cost their family $10,000 to probate their estate. And it's like, okay, well, they had a $500,000 house, but that does not mean they have $20,000 liquid to pay for the probate fees. And so what ends up happening is now your family has to sell this house that you built all this equity in because you didn't put your assets into a trust.
You didn't do the right type of agreement, the right type of tool.
Exactly. And so it's like like my plan, is to like hit that middle group because there's already a lot of people doing work at the top, and then at the bottom there's a lot of pro bono work, but it's like people who are like small business owners, entrepreneurs. Maybe you're like an athlete or something like that.
First generation middle class black folk. People
Yeah.
who don't know no better. Us, you know what I mean? People who are really coming of it, who are in professions as attorneys, and we're the first or second group of people in our family that really make, decent money. Well, I think that's a good segue too into, because you talked a bit about when you were in law school, how you switched from
Crime
this
defense.
focus on crime defense and education work to this economic justice piece. How did that come about? Was it just that internship experience with the SEC, or was there also like inklings of like, maybe there's another way I can do the civil rights work? Because when we think about civil rights work, folks think about Thurgood Marshall and marching in the streets and Ben Crump. And we know there's so much more to the profession than that. But, and I've recently found myself really enjoying economic justice work as well, in particular housing justice work. But what was that for you? What was that spark? Like, what ignited that fire for you to like, maybe my interests aren't necessarily aligned in this work with this thing, but I can have a big impact with economic justice?
A large part was the SEC. Because like I think I mentioned earlier, I saw that there was like it just felt inadequate, having like Bob pay back disgorgement payments, because the disgorgement payments are not to the harmed investor. The disgorgement payments are to the IRS, because it's like, yeah, I scammed
all these people, but the government's the priority.
Yeah, it's like I scammed $60 million. I ain't pay tax on none of that. So the IRS is like, all right, give me about $50 million of that, and then the $10 million might be put into like a fund to go for everybody else. But it's not automatic because it's not a class action, so it's not going to trickle down. Like they gotta reach out,
go and request for
and arbitrate for it. Yeah, and so that kind of made me.
There's
say,
another
like,
legal barrier, because people don't even know they got to do that, and that also can cost money. And it's like that's the whole thing. Yeah.
And it's like this is so it was that barrier, plus I think my own interest in like retail trading kind of increased when I was in law school, because while I was at the SEC externship, the extern professor for the class, he had us pick a stock and follow that stock throughout the semester. And I remember specifically a Howard alumna at the SEC, she told us in like orientation for the intern class, she was like, y'all need to watch Bloomberg, because this is what the people who you're like fighting against watch. So you need to like be up on game. And up until then, I thought financial news came from like CNBC. And then like now I think I watch Bloomberg every day. And I did that internship like 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. But then it's like it kind of changed my whole perception, because you sitting there watching Bloomberg News, and they're like, I'll give you a prime example. Because I also, like a millionaire that I know told me to subscribe in college. He told me to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal. And when he told me this, I was like, yo, isn't that like Republican news? And he was like, maybe the opinion column. He's like, because they're owned by the same people who own Fox News. He said, maybe the opinion column, but everything else is like top tier journalism. Like they're always winning Pulitzers for everything but their opinion column. And then he was like, even if the opinion column is not what you're used to, or comfortable with, he was like, it won't kill you to see what they're thinking. And then I was like, interesting. And so like I remember reading when like Russia first invaded Ukraine, there was a big thing in the Wall Street Journal. They were like, hey, Russia provides a lot of natural gas to Europe. Europe is doing a blockade of Russia for their natural gas. We have a U.S. natural gas stock in the U.S. U.S. natural gas might get a bump with this invasion. And that was like early on. So I was like, man, let me buy this stock. So I bought the stock. The stock went up like 350%. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. It was time to sell it. But because I was interning at the SEC, they made me do a freeze on all my trading. And I'm like, yo, I'm an intern.
Reading the Wall Street Journal.
And then they were like,
this is not secret information.
right. And then I was like, yo, like what? And then they were like, oh, well, you're a paid intern plus, welcome to the government. And I was like, oh.
But Nancy Pelosi and Senator Thune can trade stocks all day.
All day. And
they sitting in closed hearings with the doors closed, getting information. Close the doors. Getting the secret information. You know what I mean?
I close the door.
Anyway, I was like, it really took everything in my power not just be like, you know what? I'm going to let them catch me. What they going to do? What, fire me? I'm an intern. So I didn't do it. And then I had to watch the stock just like slowly go down and go down.
Wow.
And I had to take an L. But the good thing is I learned while I was at the SEC about something called harvesting your tax loss. And it was also reinforced in income tax, where it's like, your long-term capital gains can be offset by long-term capital losses. Mm-hmm. So it's like, like my Walmart stock, I sold some of that, about 200% gain, versus that 150% loss that I took on the natural gas. That like offsets. Now I only got 50% gain that I'm taxed on. And it's like, okay, cool. And then this is also what the wealthy do, but on like a much higher level. So it's like, I'm harvesting like $50 as opposed to 50 million.
Like 50,000, yeah.
So it's like, it's the same tactics and it's just teaching you the tools. And so while I was sitting there doing all this, and I was like, you know what? Like, there's a whole bunch of black people who are like one bad decision, one bad year from going right back to the same neighborhoods they like clawed their way out of.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's like they're only one generation removed from the projects. And it's like only reason they're removed, like prime example, a lot of people in New Orleans, like when the hurricane came, washed away some of the projects, created middle income, like mixed income housing. And it's like, okay, you still live in a housing development, but instead of it being like stacks, it's like flat out neighborhood. And you got a front yard and you got neighbors who you can't hear at night. But it's like, okay, so you might move from that subsidized housing to like, a little townhome in a suburb. But it's like, if you still don't know what you're doing with your money, kind of like we mentioned earlier, is like you can be right back to where
you were. Yeah.
And so I was like,
absolutely.
I think our generation is big on talking about generational wealth. And I was like, it really also hit when I took Will's Trust in the States, because my professor, he was a practicing estate planning attorney. And he would say stuff like, I do legacy planning. That's what I tell my clients. Because he's like, you buy life insurance, whole life insurance, and then they add to cash value. Every year you pay that cash value, you getting returns that are beating the market always, because it's an insurance company. They're going to do what they need to do to make sure that their investors get paid. And so it's like you are an investor as a contract holder. And it's like if you got $1 million policy, then when you pass, your beneficiaries are now millionaires. And so in one fell swoop, you've increased the generational wealth.
You've lifted a whole generation up.
And then I was like, oh, and he's like, but the thing is, you got a plan for that. Like, you're not just going to say like, all right, this $1 million is going to my son. It's like, nah, I'm going to put this in a irrevocable life insurance trust. And the beneficiary is my son, so that my son's income is not taxed. The trust is taxed, and the trust pays the tax from the beneficiary, from the amount that the insurance pays out. And then now my son he might not get $1 million, he might get multiple hundred thousands, but it's like in that trust still is set up to where he can't blow it all, because it has a spendthrift provision.
Spendthrift.
And
I'm
I
back
was
in
just,
class.
I was
I
just
was
like,
gonna say
yo.
this sound real familiar,
I
but
was
that's
like,
crazy because a lot of even I like how we're talking now about how your interest in civil rights shifted from criminal justice to economic justice because that's really what it's the core of it all. It's always about access. A lot of people don't even know what a trust is. I remember when I took wills and trusts too, and there were so many people who didn't even know they should have a will or like where an estate's lawyer would be, what probate is, what probate assets are, what non-probate assets are. And I don't know, it's always so interesting that a lot of things that determine how you end up is always access and education.
Yeah. And that level of like, in that, it's also critically alarming how many black folks just are like unaware of how your wealth can be taken from you and your family at your death if you don't have the proper instruments in place. You know what I mean? Like, I think that it's, which gets us into a bit, you could talk a bit more about your work that you do currently and tell us about that and kind of how those things all tie together. But, you know, it's scary to think about the fact that if you don't have these things together, you could work your whole life and essentially your family could lose your house to the government or lose your land to the government because we haven't done the work to ensure that these things stay within our family. So tell us a bit about Heirs Property and what y'all doing down there.
Okay, so that's kind of how I ended up here at Heirs Property was because my income tax professor was also my contracts professor. And I remember we had a conversation when it was time for me to pick my classes. And she asked me what my interest was because she knew that I was a Marshall Motley scholar. And she was like, I don't know. She was like, you're talking about all of this economic justice stuff. And she told me, she was like, have you heard of Heirs Property? And I was like, yeah, I remember we mentioned it briefly, I think in property law, just how, you know, it's what's created when land is not passed down at death of the owner. It just becomes the property of the heirs, and all of the heirs are now tenants in common. And because of that, it's very like tenuous, it's very risky. And I know specifically in South Carolina, my professor told me about the organization, and she basically asked me if I had ever heard of Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, and I was like, yeah, the RBC Heritage golf tournaments played there. It's like a pretty like vacation
Affluent
spot.
place. Yeah.
Yeah, and then she was like, yeah, it used to be all black land, and I was like, oh, okay, because I conflated Hilton Head as being like the southern inkwell of Martha's Vineyard, where it's like, all right, you know, that's where like the wealthy black people go to vacation. And she was like, okay, sure, some of them. She was like, but it's not black owned land anymore. It's all been given to developers. When she said given, I was like, what do you mean given? And she was like, yes, it was sold at bargain prices by the heirs of like mainly Gullah Geechee folks who they're like descendant from like the same slaves who worked those plantations. So I guess if you know about General Sherman's March to the Sea in the Civil War, where he did the 50 acres and a mule, he was standing in near Charleston, South Carolina. And he like kind of turned around and he was like, all this land belongs to the slaves who were here. But interestingly enough, like I've seen documents from that field order where like people have the original deed that was written by the former master to their ancestor, and they're giving them like 25, 50 acres, 75 acres for like something like forgiveness as a consideration, like $5 as a consideration, and or they did like a tax sale from the government, and like they got the tax sale, the deed was issued by Sherman himself, and then he like signed off on it, and the consideration that he paid was like $5 or a firm handshake and a head nod and a promise to
It's
take care
always
of
the
you.
head shake.
And it's like it's just crazy to see that, like some of these families have this same connection to the land. But then when she talked about how the land would not pass on at the death of the ancestor. So the owner of the land might have died in 1905, but it's still in his name. And what ends up happening is those 75 acres are now like 15 acres. Or like, because what happened was his descendants just didn't pay the taxes. They didn't know to pay the taxes. Like Jim Crow era happened, and like the Great Migration happened, and a lot of people went up to New York. It's amazing
I forgot
how
about the
many
land.
people. Because one of my friends said the other day, he was like, every black person, he was like, most black people are like 1 or 2 generations removed from South Carolina. And I thought it was a joke, but then it's just interesting how a lot of people really are 1 or 2 generations from South Carolina, especially on the East Coast. Because he said specifically black people in New York City. Because really what happened was like they just left in droves. They went up to New York. And like they might have left the land and like the name to like one uncle or one person from the neighborhood. And he was supposed to take care of everybody's land. And then they come back to retire and realize, oh,
He didn't take care of the land.
he didn't take care of the land. He lost it in the poker game.
And we ain't paid
lost
the
it in
taxes.
yeah, something like that. And so that's what happened at Hilton Head. So that's how the Center for Heirs Property kind of started, was because they realized that a lot of these black families needed help, like just transferring the land into the name of a living heir. Because when you have 25 people who all have ownership in 2 acres of land, and like 20 of them live in New York or Pennsylvania, and they're not even like the generation that used to come back south for the summer. They're like the grandchildren of that generation. And they're like, oh man, the South is terrible. I don't want to live there at all. And then they get a call from some random developer on a random Tuesday, and they're like, hey, you have land or an ownership interest in some land in like St. Helena, South Carolina, right? And they'll be like, what? And it's like, yeah, your great grandfather so-and-so. And it's like, oh yeah, that's the family land. And it's like, I'll give you $50,000 for your interest. And they're like, shit, might as well. Like, I could use that. Not realizing that like what they've done is now they've allowed a developer to become treated as a family member, because they're now a tenant in common. And so then as a tenant in common, they have the rights of owners. Every other owner has the right. So they can go to the master and equity court, and they can petition
and compel them to sell them.
This is horrible.
And the thing is, it's like it's one of them things where it's like what's legal versus what's right. And so
I mean, I feel like with wills and estates, it's always been that relationship. Because I remember the first case I read in my wills and estates class, or even like not in a case, it was like a prologue in my wills and estates book, and it talked about how like people who owned slaves prior to, like the Civil Rights Act, the humanization of enslaved people, that they would actually pass their slaves through wills. And that would determine, obviously, like who inherits it, but also there would be no rights for the things that, I mean, obviously at that time that enslaved people had. And so it's always interesting now talking about heirs property with you in the scope of civil rights, because it's like it's always been a civil rights issue, like since literally the beginning of property owning in this country. So that's nuts.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't even. I think realizing too when they get that share, if they're buying it from, like you say, it's 20 people. If they have 4 or 5 of those shares, now they may be the majority owner, and they got the largest interest. Because
it's just a transfer of land at that point.
And then the thing is, like, people ask, like, "Oh, how could this happen?" And it's like, well, it's just the rights of an owner. Because the court, because what happens is, I explain to clients all the time, this happens in the court of equity. It does not happen in the court of law. And then that leads us into a whole nother conversation about the difference between equity and law. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I was like, so, law, that's like contracts. That's like, all right, like, me and you had an agreement. We were supposed to do this. You didn't uphold your end of the bargain. That's messed up. I'm going to sue you. Whereas like equity is like, we're two owners. We have a dispute. The court is doing what's fair. And 9 times out of 10, what's fair is just to sell it for value and everybody get a cut.
Yeah.
But this happened before the Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act was passed in many states. And so what ends up happening is you have, like, now because of that, the developer used to be able to go to the court and say, I want to partition it. And then the court would ask the defendants, and they would say, okay, can you afford to buy them out? And then they'll ask the developer, how much do you want for your share? It's like Major said, maybe you got 4 shares, and the land is only worth, say, $70,000 or $80,000, make it easy math. And so instead of saying like, there's 8 shares, I got 4, give me 40, they're like, oh, this is waterfront property, I want 100,000. And then the family's like, damn, we can't come up with that. And then the developer's like, oh man, well, I have 250,000 liquid right now.
Guess it's mine.
The court's like, well, guess we're gonna do this partition by sale. It's like, guess so. All right, good day. Now I'm gonna put up a resort. It's gonna cost me $1 million to build. Now the land is worth $300 million, and it just happens left and right, and this big land grab. And so, like before the Uniform Act, that was happening all over. But now they can only ask for the assessed value of the land, usually. So there's like some
current state.
Yeah, there's some complications, and a lot of people hear about the Uniform Partition Act, ask about it at Heirs Property, and I tell them, it's not going to save you because it only kicks in once there's already been a sale ordered. So at that point, this is like last resort. And it's interesting, like when they had that Mother Emanuel shooting in Charleston, like the act, its manifestation in South Carolina is named after him, Clementa Pinckney, because he was a state senator or representative, I can't remember.
I think
but
so.
he pushed it through. Like he was real hard up about it. And so a lot of people just know the Pinckney Act. And it's just crazy because there's been talk that like he was trying to do more, but the way that it got pushed through the legislature was it happens at sale. Yeah. But it's still that's still like a good saving grace. But the real big thing is just to get families to understand like that you don't want to keep
be
it
in that
heirs
position.
Right. Yeah.
And so a lot of what we do is like resolution. So we do quiet title actions. We do petition to determine heirs actions, which are kind of like the same thing in a way. Quiet title is like you go through the whole chain of title and you say like A through Z all have this percentage ownership, and then the master in equity issues a new deed with all these names on it, and so now you can sell your share for value because you know how much you have exactly. And then a petition to determine heirs like a probate, and it's literally the court saying you and you are the heir of this deceased person, and all this happens after 10 years following a death. And so a major part of my role is doing like presentations and drafting wills. And in the presentations, I kind of talk about the issue and give people the dangers, and I hope that they take some action, because I think it's safe to say like the mass majority of black people in South Carolina have an interest in heirs property somewhere on some side. And then if you zoom out to the whole country, Like I know, like my own family had a similar situation at Heirs property. There was like after Hurricane Katrina with my grandmother's land, but like we were able to resolve that as a family. But it was like kind of in a rare situation, so it was real full circle for me once I had the vocabulary to understand what took place with my own family. Uh, and then of course, it being in New Orleans, there's like complications because we do things differently in Louisiana. And so it's like every state has their own manifestation of the issue.
Yeah,
And
that's,
so
that's another wrinkle because
Very
Wilson
annoying.
Estates is it's all a state thing. It's all
Yeah.
it's a state law thing. There's no uniform federal law on that. But we done held you for an hour and 15 minutes, so I think we can do we didn't even get to our keystone part of our show. So we do the 3 P's on the show. So we'll give you a lightning round real quick about the 3 different types of P's. So we have the practice, the pre-law, and the pursuit of the JD. So which type of question would you want to take first? Pre-law, practice, or pursuit?
Pre-law.
Okay. I can ask one because I got one on the dome.
Okay.
What would you say, what piece of advice would you give to a pre-law student that wants to follow in your footsteps to do like an Ivy League to like an HBCU type of educational experience? What advice do you have for them to get to those type of academic institutions?
So I guess we're talking like someone in high school or
High school, college, either or.
okay.
Anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just kind of understand what subjects you really enjoy and like focus on them. Because I remember when I was in college, there was a pre-law organization for like first generation students, and basically I remember them telling us, because they connected me with somebody who was at Yale Law, and he definitely gave me a lot of insight into like polish, if that makes sense, because he was like, hey, you forwarded me an email with your schedule, but you included the whole thread. And so like in this thread was like your mom talking about like dinner. And he was like, this is how you take off the rest of the thread. And this is kind of like, so you gotta really hone in on like what you enjoy and like focus on that, because the law touches everything. And so if you understand, like, because I know like I've always really enjoyed history, specifically Black history, so that's why I majored in African American studies. And like people are like, oh, how is that a pre-law major? And it's like, well, there's no such thing as pre-law studies for real.
Facts.
Like people think like, oh, you gotta do poli-sci, but it's like you don't. And then people say you gotta do English. It's like you also don't. You can do whatever you want. The law school just wants to see your grade point average and your LSAT.
That's all they care about. They don't care what you
So it's like if you're doing classes you actually enjoy, you might get better grades in it. Not always true, but
Yeah.
You said the other one was practice.
Oh, yeah, practice and pursuit.
Do you have a particular topic you want a question from out of those two?
Pursuit, I guess.
Pursuit. Okay. Let me see. I would say, what resources did you wish you had known more about or utilized more while you were in law school, now as a graduate?
Well, I wish I would have used like just the law library, because I feel like my interaction with the law library was very like rudimentary transactional, because I was always a person who could study in my room. So I didn't go there and study like in the stacks.
Can't
That's
relate.
often.
I wore my law school library.
Listen, I could
boy.
not be in my room. I need to be in there.
I wore that motherfucker
I need
out.
to be. I need to see them books. I need
We
to
had offices at my law school. The beautiful thing about going to law school in the South, we had our own independent offices. Man, That motherfucker, I was probably there more than I was at home sometimes.
See, we had
Yeah,
shared study rooms, but still.
yeah, we had individual study rooms as well. And I think just what I mean by that is that like I know when I was in college, I like utilized Yale's library system as much as I could, and I just read books. Like I just read whatever I wanted to read because they had something called interlibrary loan, and
Yeah.
so you can get a book from any Ivy, as
LL.
well as
Mm-hmm.
like Stanford, Georgetown, and I think another competitive school, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so I definitely didn't pay for many textbooks because you can find them through interlibrary loan. And I just
Mm-hmm.
don't know if there was something like that at Howard because I didn't use the law library that much. And it's like I remember looking at the books that they had, like the physical books, and like pulling one off the shelf just randomly and like reading about the law of some kind of random esoteric topic. And so it's like I think it behooves you as a law student to take advantage of that free knowledge that you
Yeah.
have. Well, not free because you're paying for it, but anyway, like access to it. Because
Yeah.
now it's like crazy hard to like just randomly get a book as a
Yeah.
practice attorney.
Yeah,
That's a
everything
very good
costs
point.
a lot of money.
Everything costs. That's a very
And
good
then
point.
finally moving into the practice. Oh man, I think you have so much experience. I guess. Um, Let me look on the list, but I kind of want to tailor it to what you're doing directly right now. But let's see what we have on this list.
I'll let you choose.
You got something?
I think so. Well, mine was just gonna be. I mean, it depends because you're fairly new. How long have you been working at Heirs Property in Charleston?
A year and 3 months.
Yeah. So it's hard. Not hard, but a lot of the questions we have related to practice are,
For senior folks.
yeah, pretty substantial. Um, hmm.
I guess a question I could ask is, what has it been like? I guess, what advice do you have for like, if you could tell yourself something from a year ago to today, what advice would you have about like getting ready to do this work and just like what's necessary to do it? What would you tell yourself? What would you tell Marcus in 2024 that you know now about getting ready to do Heirs property work?
I would tell him that like I would tell him to be ready for people like to be really comfortable because I think I was nervous talking to clients just because I was like, oh, this is like your family land.
Really heavy stuff. Yeah.
It's like I'm goofy, bro. Like, what do you like? Like, you have me doing some serious stuff. But I think the fact that I present the way I do is very comforting for a lot of people, and so they open up to me in ways that they wouldn't open
Especially
up to
as a
another attorney.
lawyer. Especially as a lawyer,
Yeah.
that's very, very helpful. I'm sure.
And then I think it like crystallizes in the fact I went to the very southern part of the state to do a presentation, and I remember walking in, and it was kind of like a movie scene where like the music stopped because like I walked in and like everybody stopped talking and looked at me, and then one of the community outreach people from Heirs Property was like, "Oh yeah, this is Marcus. He's our attorney who's going to speak with us today." And verbatim, somebody was like, "You don't look like no attorney," just like flat out, and it was like somebody's uncle, and
Yeah.
so I gave the presentation, and I remember the same dude who said that came up to me at the end. And he was like, "Man, I just got to shake your hand. I just got to apologize." He was like, "Because when you walked in, I was like, you looked like my nephew. He got them dreadlocks too. He got that beard
Oh,
like
damn.
you. Like, I was like, man, that boy ain't about nothing." He was like, but then once you started talking, he was like, yeah, you know your stuff. He was like, I know you get them white boys hell. And I was like, oh man, like, I just try to do, what I
do my part,
help people out. And then he was like, nah, but like, thank you, because he was thanking me just for being me. And he was like, it's inspiring to see that like we can do just as good as they can do. Because he said he's listened to other presentations on similar issues. He's like, but the way that I presented it was much more clear. He could understand it. And it's like, because I feel like I would tell myself just to be comfortable
showing up as you.
Yeah, just knowing like, because like I've always throughout school like prided myself on being able to like break stuff down to where like my grandma can understand it.
Like that's the entire point.
Yeah, it's like
And
that's how I really
especially dealing with our type of clients, man. Because if I'm talking to you in big hyperbole, legalese language, I might as well just. What good do I do being a black lawyer? You might as well just send some white person down here to talk to y'all. You know what I mean? So sorry, white people.
No, I think
you're watching,
and to that, like the biggest thing I think I do is I don't try to like insult people's intelligence. So it's like if I have to use a legalese phrase to describe what I'm talking about, I'll say it, but then I'll follow up with a synonym that's simpler. Like I'll be like, instead of saying like bifurcation of ownership interests, I'll be like, you're just splitting apart who has what. And then they'll be like, okay, bifurcation. That's just breaking it apart.
Okay.
Like, exactly. You see it. We're right here. It's also called partition. And so it's like, it's kind of not like insulting them to where they can't handle it. But at the same time, not speaking.
Making it plain.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That just increases the access. Because I feel like even in the things, like both of y'all have made really good points. Like, I think that has always been something that I think black lawyers, but maybe even, all minority lawyers, but we're black, so we're talking about black lawyers, take into account when they're learning, not even just the law, but like all professional schools, right? Like you're learning information that comes at such a high rate of accessibility that a lot of people don't have that same means to. Like even us talking, all three of us being here as law graduates, like that is something that we are 5% of the entire legal field, which means that even of like the 1.5 million people who have law degrees, we're only 5% of that, and we're still people are still having to realize like, okay, this legal term means this and that and that, and there's legal terms in every single facet of human society. So I think it's really important to just be relational, like you said, because it probably increases their comfort level with you. They're like, okay, I don't know what this means, but he's saying it, and then he break it down. I can understand what that means. Like, okay. And then when someone else says it to them, even if they are trying to be condescending, they're like, actually, I know what that means. So it doesn't matter because this attorney said it to me or that attorney. So that's really cool.
I think something I could say kind of like as a final note is that I thought was funny was just how like similar Charleston is to New Orleans. Like they call it like sister cities, I guess culturally or whatever. But then it's like we're talking history, like really, they'd come through the Atlantic, they'd make a stop in Charleston, offload, and then continue on to New Orleans and offload the rest of the cargo, human cargo. So it's like maybe that's the connection. But I always find it funny when like clients, they struggle to pronounce my name. Like they'll be like,
it's that you. It's that
like, they're like, I like Reneau, and I was like, oh, Reneau. And then they'll be like, oh, okay. And then I'm like, oh, I'm from New Orleans. And I'll be like, oh, that explains it. Yeah. Okay. And then it's even funnier because I'm like, in my mind, I was like, yeah, but that's a Belizean name because my dad is from Belize. So, like, that ain't got nothing to do with New Orleans.
Be a little Louisiana if there was an X maybe after the year.
Right.
I'd give a little,
yeah. And then, so it's just funny how, like, but like you said, like, that just adds to the comfort. Where it's like, you know, they were like, oh, you know, you look like my nephew, like, you remind me of my brother, like, and then, you know, like, it just leads to more, like, disarming, because I will say, in the Will's clinic that we did, my supervisor said, listening to me do a will was the first time she's heard somebody laugh on getting the will drafted. and she was like, in her like 10 or so years doing this work, she was like, she's never heard somebody laugh while getting their will drafted, and she was like, that just shows that I'm like having to be comfortable about this serious stuff. And I'm like, we talking about death. And then we talk about once you die, then it's like, all right, I'm going to leave it to my daughter. And it's like, all right, what if she dies before you? They're like, whoa, what?
Gotta think about that.
Hey,
So
you got to have an hour of discomfort to avoid 10 years of chaos.
And don't let y'all go together.
Exactly.
Hey.
Exactly.
That's a whole nother thing. Yeah. It's very easy to recognize like how many black lawyers you know as a black lawyer outside of people like who aren't black lawyers, that there aren't a lot. It's like us having people in our circle to be like, oh yeah, I know lawyers. Like honestly, after going to law school, I've never known so many lawyers in my life. And before that, I ain't know none. But it's very easy to be like that because it's like we're in these spaces where, I mean, ultimately that's the point. People are going to law school to study the law. But for people when that really isn't something they think about, I'm sure it's very comforting to see someone who maybe looks like their nephew or their aunt or their this or their that to be like, oh my gosh, like you could do that. And then you could sit, you could sit here and talk to me about it. And I don't feel as if you're using your information against me. You're only using it to help me. Like that is extremely important, especially to all the work that we do with you doing economic justice within civil rights, you doing housing justice and all of that. Like it's just very important. So this was a great episode. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
I have enjoyed. I've learned so much, brother. I've learned a lot about you. I've learned a lot about heirs property and just taxation. And I too am joining the I Hate the IRS train.
I've been there. Been there.
Yeah. But no, we really appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Can the folks reach out to you on any platforms, and if they have questions or things about that, or you don't want to be contacted? No is also an okay answer.
It's very odd.
They can reach out on LinkedIn. My IG is not
public.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So reach out on LinkedIn, and you're at we'll be sure to tap that in our captions and our descriptions.
Yeah.
So we'll share his LinkedIn. If you have any questions, do not ask this man for legal advice. He is a lawyer. He is not your lawyer. Okay. But he can give you thoughts.
I like to say, I can give you Googleable information.
Information.
Right.
I like
We're
that.
lawyers. We are not your lawyers.
Never.
But we want to say thank you for tuning into this episode, and we will catch y'all on the flip.
Yes. Bye.
Mm-hmm.